This isn't a government broadcast. There's no rescue signal hidden in the static. No reinforcements coming up the coast. If you're still alive, this is just a voice. My voice. Coming to you from below Signal Hill, where the world still remembers what electricity sounded like. My name is Anton Bosch. I was a systems tech with a subcontractor under SANSA, the South African National Space Agency. I wasn't part of any command chain, didn't carry a badge, didn't have clearance to sit in the high security centers. My job was to maintain the relay infrastructure and keep outdated transmission hardware on life support, back when it mattered. Back when we thought fiber optics would last forever. I'm recording this from a hardened vault, tucked into a maintenance slope, just above the Green Point Reservoir, a few hundred meters under the old World War II gun battery. You wouldn't know it was here, unless you were looking for an obsolete dish buried behind a maintenance hatch. I've been in this bunker since the start. Not because I knew what was coming. Not because anyone warned me. I was here by accident. I was inspecting a backup diesel generator. The day it started, officially, was the 12th of May. At least here. Technically, the signs were showing earlier in other places. Chile, Kazakhstan, parts of southern Alaska. We just didn't connect the dots. Or maybe someone did, and they buried the warnings. You've probably heard your own version by now. Maybe you were near a coast when the skies turned silver, or in a blackout zone when the networks failed. Or maybe you're one of those who tried to drive out and found the roads melting. I was in coveralls, standing ankle deep in cooling fluid when the first pulse hit. No warning. Just the sudden smell of ozone and this crushing pressure in the air. Like the whole atmosphere had dropped a few notches, but without wind or thunder. Every piece of powered equipment in the bunker shut down at the same moment. Lights, monitors, uplink terminals. Even the backup LED torch in my pocket blinked off like it had never existed. It was like the electrons just got up and left. Above me, the first ship had already arrived. I didn't see it until the second night, when I climbed the shaft to check the surface. Cape Town was dark. No lights from the waterfront, no ships in the bay. Just the reflection of this enormous black disk hanging above the ocean, like a bruise on the sky. It didn't move fast, it didn't glow, but it rotated. Slowly, deliberately. There was no sound from it, not even a hum, but I could feel it, like you feel the pressure in your ears before a storm. That deep, instinctive part of your brain telling you that something colossal is wrong. Later, I learned there were dozens of them. Across the globe, some shaped like monoliths, others like cubes, or enormous rings that floated over tectonic fault zones. But here, it was that disk. I still don't know how wide it is, 3 kilometers, maybe more. I only know it hasn't left its post above the southern Atlantic since the day it arrived. What came after wasn't a war, not in the traditional sense. It was a sequence. They shut us off. They didn't destroy infrastructure immediately, they crippled it. Sliced cables from orbit. Burned through cloud servers, using pulses we still don't understand. Anything connected went dead. Then anything digital. Then anything that relied on radio frequency above a certain threshold. And when they were sure we couldn't talk to each other, they started shaping the planet. By the end of the first week, major ports were silent. Shanghai, Rotterdam, Santos, Durban. Submarines went missing. Not sunk. Not attacked. Just gone. I heard a survivor from Walvis Bay talk about seeing a whole shipping convoy lift into the air before vanishing behind a wall of mist. At first, we thought it was disinformation, panic, hallucination. But the patterns kept repeating. Giant objects hovering over critical logistics hubs, harvesting something, then moving inland. The first ground incursions weren't what we expected either. No troops, no armored walkers, no giant biomechanical monsters. They were machines the size of vans, matte black, multi-legged, and almost completely silent. I spotted one from the mouth of the shaft, 10 days after the blackout. It was crawling along the edge of the soccer fields near Sea Point, moving with precision, methodical. It stopped every 10 meters, extended some kind of instrument, and scanned the ground. Then it adjusted its position and kept going. I watched it for an hour before it disappeared behind a warehouse. I haven't seen that one again, but I've seen others. They're marking territory. I know this all sounds unreal. I didn't believe it either until I started piecing things together from fragments. Not digital files, all gone, but printed data, backup manuals, field notebooks. The vault was stocked with physical schematics of analog equipment, and one of the emergency folders contained contingency plans for a solar blackout, not invasion. But the logic was the same. Survive without digital tools. Re-establish communication with regional centers. Use medium wave bands to rebuild a basic net. Only, there are no centers left. No one's answering. I've been sending this broadcast 3 times a day since I powered the backup system with remaining diesel. Each session lasts around 25 minutes. I rotate frequencies based on solar conditions, and I keep a manual log in case the recording gear fails. It's all analog now. Everything. The tape machine, the transmitter, the rooftop antenna above the shaft. If this message finds you, it means at least part of the electromagnetic spectrum hasn't been silenced. Not yet. There's more. 2 days ago, I received a transmission. Not from the city, not from land, from orbit. The signal was weak, but the origin triangulated just above the equator, drifting west over the Atlantic. I ran it through 2 tape stabilizers and an old spectrum decoder. The voice that came through was real, human, and frightened. She said her name was Maya. She's alone aboard a backup module tethered to the remains of the ISS. According to her, most of the station was torn apart by debris during the initial wave. She survived in a shielded engineering section, with no guidance systems and barely any power. She's been trying to reach ground for weeks. I'll play her full message soon, if the line holds and I can clean up the tape without damaging it. What matters now is this. The blackout wasn't just about silencing Earth. It was about isolating it, segmenting, territorializing. I've mapped what I could from the bunker's analog equipment. Based on what I can observe from the few remaining optical scopes on Signal Hill, the greater Cape Town area has been effectively abandoned. No aircraft. No maritime traffic. The naval base in Simonstown was leveled sometime in the first week. Not vaporized. Flattened, like something crushed it. The inland roads leading to Worcester are impassable due to sinkholes and what looks like targeted seismic activity, and every major communications tower from here to Nisna has collapsed. But there's still evidence of resistance, faint signs. During one of my night climbs, I saw a controlled fire burn for almost 4 hours on the far side of Table Mountain. It wasn't random. It was too clean. Like someone lit a perimeter. The smoke dissipated before dawn, and there's been no sign since. But someone's still out there, moving, planning, surviving. Maybe you are too. I'm going to keep talking. I'll share what I see, what I hear, what I've learned, and I'll keep listening. Because even though we've lost the satellites, the towers, and the eyes in the sky, we haven't lost the ground. And ground still carries signal. I've spent the better part of 2 days reconstructing that transmission. The equipment I'm working with wasn't meant for this. Most of it predates cellular networks. The only reason it's functional is because no software is required. No permissions, no firmware patches, just voltage, tubes, and copper. The message came in on a low UHF carrier, bouncing between 2 decaying orbital slots. At first I thought it was interference. Maybe some lingering resonance from a weather balloon or dead transponder. But when I cleaned the line and filtered out the harmonics, a voice came through. Quiet, raspy, stressed. She said her name was Maya. The full message was under 90 seconds, but it's the most human sound I've heard since the world went still. I'll read it back to you exactly as it came through. The distortion is too severe to rebroadcast the tape, and I don't want to risk corrupting it further. I've transcribed it line by line. Here it is. Hello, anyone receiving? This is Maya Nguyen. I'm transmitting from node Sierra 49er. It's what's left of the ESA ISS LDM segment. I've been up here since the blackout. I don't know how long. I lost track after Sol 19. The others are gone. Debris impact compromised main habitat module. I sealed myself in the service core. Food is down to 2 weeks. Air is okay. For now. Comm relays aren't responding. Earth's dark. No beacons. No downlink. But I saw something. They're not just above. They're in orbit. Objects. Shapes. Holding geostationary positions over equatorial band. I think they're watching. I think they're listening. If you're out there, any ground operator, any ham unit, any crew alive, please respond. This is Maya. I am still here. Please. That's the end of the recording. I checked the orbital parameters for Sierra 49er based on her call-out. It would place her somewhere near what used to be the European Columbus module, or possibly the Japanese Kibo lab. If she's telling the truth, and I have no reason to doubt her, then she's been drifting in a crippled station fragment for over 5 weeks. Alone. The part that chills me isn't just the survival. It's what she said about the orbit, about the shapes. According to her, the invaders haven't just occupied Earth's surface. They've taken positions in orbit, holding in fixed altitudes over the planet like surveillance buoys. That explains the signal blackouts, the total silence, the burnouts of the GPS networks. These ships, or objects, whatever they are, have formed a perimeter. They're not just watching, they're enforcing. Which brings me to what happened last night. Around 3:30 local time, I picked up a low-band pulse on the analog scope. Just one, barely above noise floor. It didn't come from orbit, it came from land. Specifically, northeast of here. Just beyond the Tigerberg Ridge. I couldn't make out content. It wasn't a voice, just a frequency spike. But it was artificial, no doubt. And it repeated twice, then stopped, like a test signal, or a coded beacon. That means someone is transmitting. Someone else is alive. I've been thinking a lot about maps, the kind we took for granted before the blackout. We had satellites tracking rainfall, traffic, wildfires, even pollen density. Now, the world is a blank canvas again. Paper maps are all we have left. I've started marking mine with colored pins, not roads or towns. Those are meaningless now. I mark it by sound. Green pins for where I've heard static, empty bands. Yellow for signal attempts. Red for confirmed locations of impact, wreckage, or sightings of the machines. And blue. Only one blue so far. For Maya, I've only placed a few dozen pins. Most of the Western Cape is silent. But last night's pulse adds a yellow. Just one. Just north of Belleville. Let's talk about the things I've seen since I started climbing back to the surface. 3 days ago, I went up the shaft around dusk. I wait until light starts to fade, because the ship above the bay seems to dim its underside after sunset. I don't know why. Maybe to conserve energy. Maybe to reduce visibility. Or maybe it's a kind of behavior, like sleep. The rooftops are mostly intact, but everything metal is oxidizing fast. I don't know if it's the salt air or something else. Vehicles are abandoned on narrow roads leading down toward Muya Point. No lights, no sign of struggle, just empty interiors, some with doors ajar, like people left in a hurry, or were taken. Further inland, along the M3, I saw what used to be a power substation. Now it looks like it's been scooped clean, not exploded, removed. Cables cut with surgical precision. The entire transmission tower folded downward in a perfect arc. That kind of force, it's not something a human machine can do, not that precisely. There were footprints near the site, not human ones. Three-pronged, deep, as if the walker or drone had concentrated weight. No drag marks, just clean imprints, each about 70 centimeters apart. I counted at least 20. And then, nothing. They vanished at the edge of a drainage ditch. I didn't stay long. What's more disturbing is the silence. No dogs, no insects, no birds within a 2-kilometer radius of the machine paths. As if life knows to avoid them. I used to think the quiet was peaceful. Now it just feels like a warning. I've seen 2 types of machines. One is the walker, black, low to the ground, 6 legs. The other is airborne, small, maybe the size of a drone, but it doesn't fly like anything I've seen. It hovers perfectly still, even in wind. When it moves, it does so in straight lines, 90-degree angles, like it's on an invisible rail. I've only seen one up close, and it didn't detect me, I think. It scanned a tree, just a tree. Then, it moved on. Whatever this invasion is, it's not chaos. It's controlled, mapped, clinical. There's no fiery destruction, no buildings turned to dust. They're not interested in spectacle. They're reorganizing the surface, quietly, efficiently, piece by piece. That's what terrifies me. Not the ships, not the silence, the method. So, I'm asking anyone who's hearing this to listen carefully. If you have an old radio, tune it to any analog band and send a short burst at exactly 5 seconds past the hour. Morse, static, whistle, anything. I'll be listening. And if you hear a double-click echo between your own signal and the dead air, it means something is bouncing it. Something close. Log it. Write it down. Time, direction, distance. Then get away from the transmitter. Use it once, not again. These machines are triangulating. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to send this broadcast. Fuel is limited. The vault's reserves were designed to run for 90 days under military lockdown, but the filters are degrading. The analog heat converters are holding, but they need rest. I can't keep the generator going 24 hours. Still, I'll be on at sunrise and sunset every day. As long as I'm breathing, as long as the frequency carries. Before I sign off, I want to leave you with this image. When I was a boy, maybe 10 years old, my father took me camping in the Cedarburg Mountains. No phone, no signal. Just the 2 of us, a fire, and the stars. That night, we talked about how humans used to navigate by sky alone, how constellations were the maps before maps. I remember looking up and feeling something bigger. Not fear, just awe. Now, I look up and it's all wrong. The stars are dimmer, the constellations are blocked. Something is between us and the sky, and it's not clouds. We're not alone anymore. Every day that passes makes it harder to tell what time really means anymore. The world has lost its rhythm. No planes, no traffic, no electric hum from buildings or passing bikes or air conditioners rattling through windows. The only sounds I hear now are wind, distant ocean surf, and the occasional soft rumble from above that isn't thunder. And that's how I know they're still here. Since the last transmission, I've been reviewing what little information I managed to salvage before the digital collapse. A lot of it's fragmented. Paper reports, old local government maps, printed mission logs from SANSA, bits of analog media, and archived research I pulled from the vault's filing cabinets. But I've managed to reconstruct a rough timeline. Not for what we call the blackout, but what came before it. The warnings, the anomalies, the signals we missed or ignored. It started, as best I can tell, in the southern hemisphere. Strange orbital decay patterns, reported by amateur satellite trackers out of La Serena, Chile. This would have been early April. Several small comsats began drifting off predicted paths. Nothing major at first, just a few degrees of deviation. But they were consistent. That kind of synchronized drift doesn't happen without an external force. A week later, Ground radar out of Alice Springs, Australia, detected high-altitude objects with no transponders. Not debris, not meteors. Slow-moving masses holding fixed positions at geostationary orbit. No response to hails, and no thermal signature. That's what flagged them. They were too cold. Space is cold, yes, but satellites radiate heat. These didn't. It was like they were absorbing energy instead of emitting it. Then came the atmospheric dimming. That's what the ESA called it in a quiet bulletin to affiliated observatories. They documented a 0.03% decrease in albedo readings over multiple continents, which in plain terms means Earth was reflecting less sunlight. Something was absorbing light in the upper atmosphere. But there were no clouds, no volcanic ash, no major weather anomalies. It was never broadcast publicly. The memo was dated April 2020. 3 days later, a telescope operator at Sutherland Observatory noted that Betelgeuse, one of the brightest stars in the Orion constellation, was completely invisible during a clear night. Not dim, not faint, gone. The data made its way through research circles, and then the disappearances began. High-altitude flights lost contact over the Pacific and Indian Oceans. The last known voice recording I recovered from a military archive came from a U.S. Air Force C-17 en route to Diego Garcia. The pilot reported structured interference around the plane. Then silence. The wreckage was never found. I've marked those last known locations on the map in the vault. A triangle of airspace between Guam, Madagascar, and Antarctica. The same triangle where most of our space-based infrastructure was routed. Whatever came for us, it didn't come fast. It came quietly, piece by piece. A surgical shutdown. And then on May 12th, every major urban power grid failed within a 10-hour window. Tokyo, Berlin, Washington, D.C., Lagos, Sao Paulo, Melbourne. All of them blinked out, one by one, like candles in a wind. That was the blackout, the moment Earth stopped speaking to itself. I wasn't in a position to witness the global fallout firsthand, but I have a printed backlog of international telemetry sheets. One of the last verified entries was from a Norwegian radio observatory that detected harmonic tremors not from within Earth's crust, but from the exosphere, above the thermosphere, where no sound should travel at all. The readings showed vibration frequencies that fell outside any known electromagnetic classification. It's like they were playing chords across the planet. Notes we couldn't hear, but our machines could. And once the music started, our tools stopped working. We weren't just invaded. We were tuned out. The aliens, and I no longer hesitate to use that word, and didn't arrive with noise and fire. They came like mathematicians, like engineers of silence. They mapped our nodes, severed our networks, erased our mirrors, and left us facing each other with no way to speak. Which is why this broadcast matters more than ever. It's not just signal. It's proof. Proof that something human still echoes beneath their blanket of control. I want to tell you about something I found yesterday. A few kilometers northeast of the bunker, buried under a collapsed stone wall behind a maintenance trail, I uncovered what looked like a weatherproof storage drum. Military issue. Marked with South African Defense Force insignia. I dragged it back to the vault with a wheel dolly and opened it inside the airlock. Inside were 3 sealed Pelican cases. The first contained 6 shortwave radios, pre-digital, crystal-tuned, designed for low-power, long-range relay. One of them still worked. The second held maps, hand-annotated topographical sheets covering coastal regions of southern Africa, as well as parts of Mozambique and Namibia. On one of them, there were handwritten notations in red marker. Small circles, crossed-out zones. Cape Town was marked with a thick black X. The rest were labeled lost. But the third case was the most valuable. It held a thermal imaging monocular, passive IR, no active emission, fully analog. I've used it 3 times since recovering it. And what I saw confirmed what I feared. The ships above the ocean aren't alone. There are vertical anomalies forming inland, narrow towers of dense, metallic structure, pushing up through what used to be public infrastructure. I spotted one 2 nights ago beyond the Tigerberg Hills. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't warm, but it radiated. Nothing. A perfect absence. As if the earth beneath it had been surgically removed. I don't know what these towers are doing. I don't know if they're communication beacons, or energy collection nodes, or worse. But they're spaced evenly, geometrically, hexagonal placement, classic tiling pattern, like some kind of long-term occupation grid. They're building something, not just watching, not just removing us, but preparing. The resistance, if it still exists, must know this. These drums were part of some contingency plan, a last-ditch effort to equip scattered survivors. But the fact that I found one here, untouched, means whoever was supposed to retrieve it never made it. I haven't found bodies, but I've found signs of panic, torn plastic packaging, a crushed headset, a dried-out water pouch dropped beside an overturned emergency beacon. They were running. From what, I still don't know. But I know this. The machines don't hunt like predators. They don't stalk, they map, they tag, they catalog, and then they move on. Which means if you're stationary, if you're transmitting, staying warm, using powered devices, you're leaving fingerprints they can see. Everything smart is dangerous now. Even thinking like we used to is dangerous. I'll close with one more piece of evidence. A broken voice. This morning I picked up a faint analog relay rebounding off the upper ionosphere. It was brief, garbled, but clearly human. It repeated 4 times before vanishing into static. I copied it by hand. Here's what it said. Frequency 2, 6, 8, repeat, refugee column compromised, sector Hotel Bravo, broken contact with Caledon, fall back to, advise, scatter, and dig. Then silence. It wasn't a transmission meant for me. It was a desperate call sent blindly. But it means someone is out there. They're still trying, still resisting. Day 45 since the blackout began. If you're just joining me on this frequency, the world hasn't ended, but it's no longer ours. This morning, just before first light, I climbed back up to the surface to realign the antenna and survey the western horizon. The sky was still gray, hanging heavy with marine air. The city remained silent. No aircraft, no lights. But something has changed. It smells different now. The air, it's heavier, more metallic. I don't know if it's chemical, biological, or just the absence of exhaust and motion and electricity. But there's a weight to everything. Like the earth is holding its breath. I promised I would talk about Caledon, about the broadcast I picked up. I'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about war. Not the kind fought in textbooks or films. Not the wars with flags and medals and tactical precision. I mean the real kind. The kind that creeps in sideways. That begins not with a declaration, but with silence. Infrastructure vanishing. Maps becoming meaningless. Old routines falling away until all that remains is survival, and the knowledge that something else has taken your place in the chain of command. That's where we are now. The last military presence I confirmed in the Western Cape was around day 6. I saw a convoy of 6 vehicles moving up the Nun toward Parle, painted in gray and green, some armored, most not. They didn't stop for anyone. No lights, no sirens, just movement. That convoy never came back. I found the remains 3 weeks later, just north of the old Franschhoek turnoff. Vehicles stripped clean. Not by looters, by something else. Something methodical. Tires removed, chassis disassembled. Engines pulled apart. Every copper wire gone. Each component organized into neat piles, like a lab specimen waiting for classification. No bodies. Just one dog tag. Name worn off. That's not war. That's post-mortem harvesting. And it's happening everywhere. 3 days ago, after a brief radio spike, I decided to follow the fragment of that transmission, the one that mentioned Caledon. I didn't know what I'd find. I didn't even know if I'd make it back. I prepped the vault for a 3-day absence, topped off the passive filters, set the emergency relay to loop the last recording, packed what little gear I had, a solar blanket, 2 flares, the infrared monocular, and an old bolt-action hunting rifle I found in a locked cabinet on the lower level. It had 6 rounds. I took all 6. I also took a map, a real one, laminated, marked in pencil, and I walked. It took me nearly 2 days to reach the far side of Hawek Pass. I traveled by night, slept in culverts, and under overturned road signs during daylight. I didn't want to risk lighting a fire. Not after what I've seen in the sky. But the nights are colder now. Colder than they should be for May. That's something no one's talking about. The shift in temperature. It's subtle, but consistent. 5 to 7 degrees lower than average for this time of year. Enough to matter. Enough to kill. It's not a natural winter. On the second night, I heard thunder to the south. But it wasn't weather. It was something moving over the ocean. Not fast, not aggressive, just passing by. A low rumble that came and went like an underwater current. And then, as I reached the outer limits of Caledon, I saw what was left of the town. Or rather, what wasn't. Most of Caledon's central district is gone. Not burned, not shelled, dismantled. Buildings collapsed in strange patterns, vertical slabs fallen sideways, as if pulled from beneath. Roads peeled up like ribbons. Entire vehicle frames flattened to the point that their axles fused with the asphalt. But the most unsettling thing wasn't the destruction. It was the signs. Someone, or several someones, had painted symbols onto remaining walls and windows using whitewashed mud. Large, geometric shapes, concentric circles, triangles, with vertical lines bisecting them. No letters, no words, just symbols, repeated over and over. I don't know what they mean. Not yet. But I took photos with an old analog camera I'd salvaged from a second-hand shop months before the blackout. If I can develop the film back in the vault, maybe I'll find a pattern. I followed the road past what used to be the town square, and that's when I found it. A camp. Makeshift, barely standing, built into the shell of a former grain warehouse, walls patched with corrugated metal, crates, and salvaged wire. I found signs of life, recent life, coals still warm in a fire pit, water containers, footprints, scraps of packaged food, and a torn page from a weather journal. The page was dated just 5 days ago. It had one word circled in red. Scatter. I spent the rest of the night inside that warehouse, hidden in the shadows, waiting, listening. But no one came back. I think they were driven out, maybe by a drone, maybe by something worse. But someone was there, and they were prepared. The camp wasn't a refugee pit. It was organized. They had sentries, even a crude antenna loop mounted on the roof. Whoever they were trained. I searched the shelves for anything useful and found a hardbound field log. It had no names, no ranks, just field observations written in black pen. Most of the entries were coordinates. But one caught my eye. Confirmed pattern. Units gather samples every 6.2 hours. Never return to same location twice. Possible terraforming? Soil conversion? Radiation sinks unchanged. UV interference increasing. Plants dying. No visible regrowth. It ended with the same word I saw on the weather sheet. Scatter. I've read it over a dozen times. Each word makes the shape of this occupation clearer. The invaders aren't burning the planet. They're rewriting it, subtly, systematically, restructuring the biosphere to match something they understand. And we're in the way. I made it back to the vault late last night. My boots are ruined. The rifle's down to 2 rounds. But I'm here. And now I know the truth. We're not just survivors. We're trespassers on our own world. But there's something else I have to say before I end this transmission. Something I've been thinking about for days. Maya, the girl still orbiting above. She said she saw ships holding positions in geostationary orbit that they hadn't moved in weeks. But last night, I picked up a new spike. A pattern. A second voice. I haven't decoded it yet. It's faint, almost buried under the static. But it's real. Someone else is up there. Maybe more than one. And if the aliens haven't cleared the station completely, it means something is interfering with their control. Something they didn't anticipate. It might be time. It might be solar interference. Or it might be us. The ones who haven't scattered yet. Last time, I told you I heard a second voice. Another orbital signal. Distinct from Maya's transmission. That remains true. But what I didn't say then, what I wasn't sure of until this morning, is that I think I've decoded part of it. Not the full content. Just a pattern, a time code, and it changes everything. Let me walk you through what's happened in the last 3 days. After returning from Caledon, I stayed below ground longer than usual. I didn't trust what I'd seen out there. The machines, the stripped buildings, the silent camp. It all felt like bait. Or worse, like a test. Something observing how I moved, where I paused, how I reacted to the wreckage of my own species. So I stayed put. I rationed. I cleaned the filters. I reset the pressure valves and recalibrated the analog stabilizer that keeps this transmission from fading into static halfway through the night. And when all that was done, I sat in front of the spectral scope and waited. On the second night, around 2:40, the pulse came again. Narrow, faint, riding just above the floor noise on the lower VLF band. Extremely low frequency, practically seismic. I ran it through a crude analog multiplier and fed it into the tape deck using the vault's external reel modulator. And that's when I saw it. Not a message. Not language. A sequence. Binary? No. Too irregular. Morse? Closer? But still wrong. What I saw, what I still see every time I close my eyes, is a rhythmic modulation in 5 parts. Long burst, short burst, long pause, twin echo, then nothing. And it repeats. Every 11 minutes and 36 seconds. Exactly. I didn't recognize the pattern at first. But then I cross-referenced the spacing with known telemetry protocols from orbital navigation systems. And that's when I realized it's a timing beacon. Not from Earth. Not from any human satellite. But locked to a fixed point, roughly 36,000 kilometers above the equator, west of Central Africa. That matters, because it means the ship up there, or structure, or platform, or whatever's sitting in that orbit, is sending synchronization pulses. Not just watching, not just listening, coordinating. And that second voice, the one I heard, it replied between those pulses. Not in sync, but in rebellion. Someone, or something, up there is trying to talk without being caught, and I intend to hear them. I've begun rotating part of my antenna array to scan wider arcs of the ionospheric bounce zone. It's primitive, a hacked-together mess of salvage parts, grounded with copper rods and stabilized with rock ballast. But it works. I've boosted signal clarity by 8%, enough to make out partial waveform profiles. The second signal is human, not AI, not random noise, but it's badly damaged. I need more time. Meanwhile, I've developed the film I shot in Caledon. The old camera held up better than I expected. The images are grainy, but clear enough. The symbols painted in whitewash on those broken buildings weren't random. They repeat every few frames. Always three shapes: a circle, a vertical bar, and what looks like a trident with the center point extended. I laid the photos out on the bunker floor and aligned them over a grid map of the region. The spacing matched old military safe zone layouts. Sector-based, defensive radii. Whoever left those symbols was using them to mark paths, or perhaps locations that the machines ignore. I've placed those marks on my own paper map now. They don't follow roads. They follow magnetic lines. That's significant. It suggests the enemy is avoiding areas with irregular magnetic anomalies, possibly to maintain sensor calibration, which means we can hide. We can still hide, but not for long. I want to shift gears for a moment, because in all the data, all the recordings, all the moments where survival and obsession blur, it's easy to forget what we've lost. Not just systems, people. I don't have a list. There are no obituaries, no casualty reports, but I remember names. My neighbor, Peter, who sold refurbished radios out of a garage and observatory, gone. Mandla, the Sansa supervisor, who taught me how to hotwire a backup satellite dish using just a wrench and 2 fuse wires, gone. Yasmin, who ran the corner store with the broken freezer. Her little girl wore a Spider-Man backpack. I still have it. I found it on the floor of the train station. Gone. We are not just survivors. We are the gravekeepers of a vanished world. But we are still here. Let me tell you what I heard yesterday. A voice. For just 9 seconds. A man's voice. Deep. Tired. He said, "Too safe in Worcester. Food almost gone. Avoid the water station." Repeat. Avoid the water station. Then nothing. 9 seconds of defiance. And it's more than I've heard from any human in weeks. I'm going to try to reach them. It's risky. Worcester is outside the range of regular patrols, but it's also closer to one of the confirmed vertical towers I saw through the infrared scope. If I go, I'll leave a recorded loop behind. I'll bury this transmitter deep into the vault and rig the door on a delay timer so it reseals automatically. I can't take the risk of being followed back here, but I have to know. Because if there are still organized survivors, still coordinated groups who've mapped safe corridors, then maybe the resistance didn't die. Maybe it just went quiet. Before I end this transmission, one more thing. I ran the timing code from the orbital pulse through an old NASA emulator I found stored in a backup drive. It's outdated but accurate enough. The signal, it's not just orbiting Earth. It's offset slightly. Eccentric orbit. Inclined by 4.2 degrees. That's not a stable human orbit, but it's perfect for surveillance. Constant field of vision over most of Africa, the Indian Ocean, and southern Europe. Someone placed that object with care, with precision, not just to monitor us, but to command something. A relay, a control point, or a nerve center. I don't have drones. I don't have satellites. I have this transmitter. I have this voice. And I have you, wherever you are, whoever you are, listening. That means we're not blind. Not deaf. Not yet. Day 52. I'm back from Worcester. It wasn't easy. I wasn't prepared. Not really. I left before sunrise 3 nights ago with 2 water canisters, 5 compressed meal packs, the old bolt-action rifle, now with a single round left, and 1 functioning shortwave transceiver. I took the smaller pack, stripped down the gear, reduced weight wherever I could. I had to move quiet, light, and slow. Worcester is only about 120 kilometers northeast, but in this world, it might as well be Mars. I traveled mostly at night, navigating by landmarks and the map I've annotated since the blackout began. I used to take the Nun when it was still a road. Now it's a graveyard of abandoned cars, dead asphalt, and fragments of things we used to call cities. I avoided the main highway and cut through old farm roads and vineyard trails, most of them overgrown and littered with fragments of machinery that looked like they'd been hit with precision-cutting beams or melted in place. The further inland I went, the less decay I saw. Less destruction, more absence. Like something had swept through and erased entire layers of infrastructure. On the first night, I camped near the ruins of what used to be a truck weigh station. The digital signage was still intact, but warped, as if the heat had rippled the metal from within. There was a smell I can't describe, like ozone, burnt plastic, and cold stone. I slept under the frame of a collapsed billboard. Woke twice during the night to movement in the trees, but no contact. Just the rustle of small animals. Or at least I hope they were animals. I reached the outskirts of Worcester by the evening of the second day, and everything I'd heard was true. The town wasn't destroyed. It was emptied. Completely. No fire damage. No looting. No craters. Just block after block of intact houses, street signs, fences. Even the gardens had been maintained until very recently. I passed a small community park where the grass had been cut, maybe a week ago. A wooden bench was still upright, casting a long shadow toward a cracked public restroom. A backpack lay beside it, unzipped, contents untouched. It's not that the people died. It's that they left. Fast. Something scared them. I followed the coordinates I jotted down from the last voice I heard. The one who said, "Too safe in Worcester." The transmission wasn't long, and it didn't specify a location, but I had a rough grid based on signal strength and bounce angle. I traced it to an old municipal water treatment plant at the edge of town, next to the riverbank. The same one he warned us to avoid. I approached from the rear, using the tree line and a culvert path that was overgrown with reeds. The plant's main structure was intact. No visible signs of attack. The doors were shut, but not locked. The air smelled wrong. Inside, the power was out, but there were signs of recent activity. A mattress, still warm. An overturned chair. A portable radio left on a desk. Its battery drained. I found a boot print. Heavy, wide, same pattern as South African military issue. And near the generator room, someone had written on the wall in chalk. "It mimics." I don't know what that means yet, but I didn't stay to find out. As I backed out through the lower corridor, I heard a voice. From the shadows, it was female. Calm, familiar. She said my name. Anton. Just once. No echo. No footstep. No response when I whispered back. I left. Fast. Later, when I circled the plant from the ridgeline, I saw something move near the main entrance. Not human, not animal. It was shaped like a tall figure in a suit, but it moved too smoothly. Too precisely. It walked to the door, paused, then faded. I don't mean disappeared behind something, I mean faded, like an image being erased line by line. I've never seen anything like it, and I pray I never will again. I made my way north, hoping to find the safe house or resistance group that had sent the transmission. About 2 kilometers from the town center, I found a structure buried under vines and steel sheets, an old radio repeater station. The windows had been sealed with scavenged car hoods. Inside, it was quiet, dark, but lived in. Whoever had been there was gone, but not long ago. There were meal wrappers dated only days earlier. Hand-drawn maps of the region. One of them marked with colored pencil, red arrows pointing toward the Swartberg Mountains. I found a note taped to the inside of a crate. Leaving at sunrise. Too many scans. Heading for high elevation. Radio will loop at 500. If this is Anton, don't trust voices. Not even hers. I took the note. I turned on the radio. And for the first time since the blackout, I heard a full loop recording. A real one. Not just a pulse. A voice. Male. Confident. Clear. Here's what it said. This is Transmission Group Echo 9. Operating under fallback continuity protocol. Cape Town sector is lost. Worcester was never meant to hold. We've moved northeast into the tertiary corridor. If you find this loop, do not stay in urban centers. They are mapping human emotional response. Repeat. They are learning how we react. Avoid all mimic units. They use voice memory. If you hear someone you know, and you know they cannot be there, do not engage. Retreat and break line of sight. This is Echo 9, moving toward Extraction Ridge Point, Sierra 12. End of loop. They're still alive. Or at least they were. They confirmed the mimicry. The voice I heard at the water plant wasn't real. It used my name, and it sounded like my mother. But she died before all of this. 6 years ago. Cancer? I never told anyone that. So how? I don't have an answer. But I know this. The invaders have more than weapons. They have memories. And they're using them. I returned to the vault last night, exhausted, hungry. I barely made it down the shaft before sunrise. The moment I sealed the hatch, I heard something above. Not footsteps, not wind. A scraping, like metal on stone. It circled the top of the hill once, then stopped. I waited 5 hours before turning on the generator again. And now, I'm here. I followed the red arrows left by Echo 9. The Swartberg Range was never meant to hold people. It's a jagged stretch of folded rock and canyon valleys, with few trails and even fewer signs of human maintenance. The kind of place where, even before the blackout, you'd get lost without a compass or be forced to turn back by weather alone. Now, it's not weather we fear. It's silence. Not the kind you find in nature, but the artificial kind. The oppressive vacuum the machines leave behind after they pass through. There's a clear difference. Wind doesn't move the same. Air feels thin. Pressure changes. And animals vanish. You feel it in your bones before you see anything. I left the Worcester repeater shack 2 nights ago, following a dry riverbed heading north by northeast. No vehicles. I went on foot, under moonlight. The highlands offered natural cover. Rocky slopes gave me vantage points. I took the IR monocular from the vault and a small shortwave scanner rigged with a hand-crank charger. It only holds power for 3 minutes at a time, but it's enough. The further I traveled into the foothills, the more I realized what Echo 9 meant by Extraction Ridge Point Sierra 12. I found it etched into a trail marker. A scratched S12 beneath an old weathered hiking symbol. No one unfamiliar with the trail would have noticed it. They were leaving a path, and I was walking it in reverse. By early morning, I reached a rock overhang, overlooking a narrow basin filled with debris, what looked like the remains of a transport or mobile command unit. Not alien, ours, human. Burned out, half buried in shale, hull melted inward. Based on the treads and armor plating, it had been some kind of modified mining crawler, repurposed for field use. The wreck was recent, less than a month old, but there were no bodies, only equipment, and scorch marks on the slope above, spaced in even intervals. I counted 7. These weren't blast craters. They were landings, or deployments. The scorched soil carried the same chemical residue I'd seen near the Cape Town Tower site, the one I spotted through infrared weeks ago. A kind of vitrification. Sand turned to glass, fused with embedded mineral composites. This wasn't fire. It was heat from below, as if the ground had been cooked from the inside out. Near the edge of the crawler wreck, I found what looked like a data capsule. Lightweight, shielded. I cracked it open and pulled the drive. Analog, surprisingly. Military issue. Likely part of a blackout protocol. Only use media that can survive EMP exposure. I haven't decoded it yet. It'll take time, and the vault's old gear may not be compatible. But the casing was labeled VRU 3, Operations File, Swartberg Assault, Ground to Orbit Intercept. That changes things. It means there was a coordinated assault on one of the towers. Not just resistance, retaliation. I haven't heard of any success. No word from other regions. No confirmation from orbit. But this wreck proves that someone tried. That Echo 9, or those above them, mounted a direct offensive, and that the aliens stopped them. Brutally, efficiently, without leaving a single corpse. This raises a question no one has asked yet, or at least not out loud. Why no bodies? We've seen destruction. Empty cities, wrecked vehicles, camps, campsites, homes, streets, ships, all intact, but abandoned. Yet, in most cases, no remains. No skeletons, no evidence of decomposition, only absence. If the enemy was killing us, we'd find signs, but we don't. So the question becomes, are they taking us? Or dismantling us? Some believe it's harvest. Others think it's displacement, removing us to clear the surface. But a theory occurred to me as I hiked that ridge, staring down into the shadows of a dead convoy. What if they're not destroying us? What if they're copying us? Simulating, learning, and the copies are what we're hearing. The voices that call our names from nowhere. The familiar words that echo from structures long abandoned. The faces that move like ours, but do not breathe. It's not war. It's reflection. We're not fighting an invader. We're fighting our own signal, bounced back through an alien filter. I know how insane that sounds, but it matches what I've seen, and it explains the mimic units. They don't speak randomly. They respond. They bait. Like a mirror held just far enough away that you can't see yourself clearly, but close enough that you recognize the outline. And when you step toward it, it steps toward you. I believe the assault on the orbital relay at Swartberg was meant to interrupt that loop, and it failed. I spent the night in a fissure near the ridge, covered the mouth with dead branches, and cloaked myself under a thermal blanket. I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing the signal. Not over the radio. In the rocks. Low-frequency pulses. Vibrations in the ground, spaced 5 to 6 seconds apart. At first, I thought it was seismic activity. Then I realized it was directional. A buried cable. A relay system. Old or new, I couldn't say. But something is moving underground. A kind of echo chamber for signal traffic. They're not just on the surface, or in orbit. They're beneath us now. Worse, they've started talking to each other. Before I left the ridge, I found a cluster of old relay posts near the summit. 3 had been toppled. The 4th was active. I don't mean glowing. I mean warm. I approached and saw that the interior panel had been converted. Still recognizable, but augmented. Analog wires spliced into a crystalline substrate that didn't look human. Like something grown, not manufactured. It was humming. The pitch changed as I neared it. I backed away slowly and made my descent at first light. That unit is transmitting. Still. Right now. And I have no doubt it's broadcasting a map. Not for us. But for them? I made it back to the vault less than 6 hours ago. I haven't slept, haven't eaten, just calibrated the system and set this broadcast to run live. Because someone needs to know. If you're in a group, if you're still organized, if you're planning counteraction, know this. The enemy isn't just watching. It's integrating. We are part of its study now. And if it has the means to use our infrastructure, then every signal we send may no longer be a cry for help. It may be a target beacon. I've spent the last 48 hours decoding the analog drive I recovered from the wrecked crawler transport near Swartberg. It wasn't easy. The connectors were damaged, and I had to rebuild part of the drive bay using spare fuse plates from the vault's old environmental sensor rack. The readout unit isn't fully stable, but I've extracted partial data logs. Enough to confirm something we've only guessed at until now. The Resistance did make contact with the alien infrastructure. They reached one of the towers, and they left behind more than just wreckage. According to the files, labeled VRU-3, the assault team was comprised of 9 members, call signs Echo 9 through Echo 1. Most of the notes are time-stamped with old UNIF operational standards used by multinational military forces during joint disaster scenarios. That tells me this wasn't a purely local unit. These were trained personnel, international, maybe even operating under remnants of a formal command structure. One log entry, written by Echo 3, describes a brief, stable signal intercepted from what they refer to as a Tier 1 relay node. The entry reads, "Uplink tower responsive to passive analog handshake. No return ping, but spectral signature matches orbital beacon 4BK. Hostile response occurred 3 minutes after initial handshake. Directional discharge. 2 team members incapacitated. Retreat initiated. Copy of handshake pattern stored on physical tape, sealed in secondary capsule." I haven't found the tape. It may still be at the site, buried in the rockfall. But the coordinates listed for the tower, not the relay post, but the uplink station itself, point toward the Upper Cedarburg Range. That's over 250 kilometers north of here, nearly inaccessible by vehicle. But I remember it. Not from work, from childhood. My father took me there once, back before everything changed. There was an old satellite array tucked into the cliffs above Algeria Forest Station, one of the first orbital uplink facilities built in South Africa during the Cold War, long since abandoned. No power, no security, just empty dish skeletons buried in the mountainside. We camped near the basin and hiked up before dawn. He told me back then it was the highest place in the country where humans once spoke to the stars. Now, it may be our only chance to hear them again. I've made the decision. I'm going to climb back up to Cedarburg and locate the old station. I have no illusions about what I'll find. It's likely buried, collapsed, or overridden by the machines. The towers may be surrounded by whatever force keeps the mimic units near populated zones. The air may be unsafe. The trip will take at least 5 days, if I ration carefully. I've marked my route using the updated map grid from Swartberg, crossing only sectors I've tagged with blue, places where the soil is brittle and the drones avoid flying. But before I go, I want to share what came through the receiver last night, because I wasn't the only one listening. I picked up a faint voice loop. The signal was bouncing through at least 3 repeaters, possibly more. The frequency was unstable, but I recorded the best fragments I could. Here's the clean transcript. This is Operator Louise de Klerk, out of Windhoek Fallback Zone, Tier 4 comms. Station has been compromised. Atmospheric window above southern band is narrowing. No orbital response. Ground agents retreating to Phase 4 positions. Broadcasting beacon loop every 25 minutes. If you're alive, keep moving west. Do not approach towers with circular bases. They extract. They don't kill. Repeat. They extract. This is de Klerk. Still transmitting. Windhoek. That's Namibia. Northwest of here, across hundreds of kilometers of dead zone and unstable terrain. If she's still alive, it means there's another node, another survivor network. But they extract? That matches what I've seen. What I've not seen, the missing bodies, the quiet evacuations, the sudden collapse of entire towns without evidence of a fight. Whatever they're doing, it's not extermination. It's removal. Piece by piece. Systematically. I ran a scan for orbital presence again, using the Vault scope and EM dish. Later I observed 3 distinct returns from high orbit. One matches the original ship above Cape Town. One aligns with the orbital platform Maya reported. The third is new. Larger, slower, positioned over Central Africa, drifting east. That ship is not stationary, and it appears to be lowering mass into the atmosphere. I don't mean landings. I mean insertion. Long, thin filaments, trailing downward into cloud cover. I watched one pulse, glow, and retract. Like a probe, or a tether. They are mapping more than our surface. They are connecting, integrating, maybe even replacing something in the deep layers of the planet itself. That brings me to the final part of tonight's transmission. In the backup drives I recovered from the Swartberg crawler, I found references to a last-ditch communications fallback called Project Ground Mirror. No details, no technical specs, just a mission statement. If orbital loss reaches Phase 6, initiate surface in sky loop at highest elevation using remaining analog dish architecture. Operate outside the ionospheric buffer, all frequencies, all languages. Priority, send Earth's memory. That's what I'm going to do. That's why I'm going up to Cedarburg. Not to win, not to fight, but to speak. To push the memory of us past the sky. To leave a record they can't scrub. A sound that doesn't fade. It's day 65. If you're still out there, I'm going to tell you everything I saw on the ridge. Everything I found at the old uplink site above Cedarburg. And why the silence we've been living in may not be an accident. I left the vault 6 days ago, climbed out just before dawn and moved along the path I mapped on analog topography sheets from the Swartberg caches. I carried only what I could load into a mid-weight ruck. One reconditioned shortwave unit, 4 days worth of rations, the IR monocular, a steel frame wind tarp, and 2 thermobaric charge caps I found hidden in a container beneath the emergency relay room. I don't know who stashed them there. I didn't ask. I took them. The hike north was punishing. The old service road through Citrusdal is choked with debris and fallen trees, and it's clear from the pattern of vehicle wrecks that panic hit there hard. Not a battle, just a collapse. Cars veered off the road, doors open, engines dead. A fuel truck had jackknifed into the side of a grain hauler. No signs of fire, no bodies. Just the long silence of flight, frozen in place. I spent the second night, sheltering beneath the overpass outside Clan William, tucked into a broken culvert, out of view of the sky. I've stopped using digital watches. They fail. My mechanical one ticked 3 times that night, and then stopped. When I opened the casing, the springs had melted together. No heat damage, no mechanical stress, just fused. That means something in the air, or magnetosphere, is shifting fields on a scale I don't understand. Whatever's up there is interfering with timekeeping. That explains the erratic sunrises, the off-angle shadows, the way reflections on water feel late. Time is no longer constant. They're bending it. By the 3rd day, I made the ascent path toward the old Cedarburg uplink. It's a brutal climb, not meant for sustained foot traffic. Back in its operational days, the site was serviced by helicopter or tracked ATV. Now it's just a twisted trail of stone and brambles, winding through narrow switchbacks and steep gorges. The air gets thin quickly and dry, but it's quiet. No machines, no mimicry, not at that altitude. I started to believe I might reach the dish alone. I didn't. About 200 meters from the summit, just before the upper ridge where the array was mounted, I found a shelter dug into the rock. A survival pod. Civilian grade. Cracked open. Battered by rockfall, but intact enough to offer shade. Inside was a body. An old man. Long dead, maybe weeks. Dressed in Sansa overalls, still bearing the faded patch of the original uplink crew from the 90s. His ID tag read, J. Duvenhage. I remembered the name. He gave a lecture once, at a technical college and observatory, retired in 2011. He must have come back here, thinking the dish could be revived. Maybe he brought others. Maybe he was left behind. There was a note etched into the inner wall of the shelter, carved with what looked like the tip of a metal bracket. They are not watching us. They are watching each other. We are just the film they run between the reels. I don't know what it means, but I think it's true. I reached the array just before dusk. The Cedarburg dish is still there. Or rather, its skeleton is. The main reflector was torn away, twisted into a curled arc pointing toward the western horizon. But the central tower housing the uplink spine and analog base hardware was largely intact. I climbed inside through a shattered service hatch and found something I didn't expect. The system was still warm. No lights. No interface. But the hardware had residual heat, barely above ambient, like it had been used recently. And then I found the source. Behind a locked panel, hidden beneath a floor hatch marked Access 4, I discovered a buried capsule wrapped in thermal cloth and sealed with industrial resin. Inside was a working analog processor core, manually wired, no OS, no software, just a self-contained logic relay. It was connected by cable to a spliced antenna mount just above the roofline. Someone was broadcasting. I hooked my handheld shortwave to the dish line and rotated the frequency loop, stepping through every known analog band. Nothing at first. Then I found a pulse. Repeating. Regular. But encoded. I ran it through the basic analog decoder I've carried since the early weeks. Crude, but effective. And I heard a voice. Male. Not a loop. A conversation. Not live. Recorded. But not that old. Here's what I captured. Verbatim. This is Ground Mirror Station 9. Atmospheric boundary integrity falling below tolerance. Magnetosphere breach expected within 72 hours. Sky units repositioning. Earth side activity diminishing. Signal reflection indicates a recursive probe loop. We are not being observed. We are being simulated. Broadcast memory core to full sky arc. Ground mirror station 9 out. That's all. The pulse ended 30 seconds later. The processor shut down. I couldn't revive it. But I knew, in that moment, what the old technician meant. We're not just the observed. We are the program. The machines, the ships, the mimic voices, the towers, they are not just taking our cities. They are running iterations, scenarios. Each removed settlement, each vanished group, each relocated survivor is part of a recursive test. A simulation of civilization, a stress model of humanity. And the goal isn't conquest. It's comprehension. They are trying to understand what we are. Maybe to become us. Maybe to prevent what we became. Or maybe to prove something to each other. That we are worth saving. Or not. I stayed on the ridge overnight. The sky was unusually clear. Cold. The stars hung perfectly still. No satellites. No blinking lights. Just a slow-moving shape across the western arc. Wide, dark, silent. The Cape Town ship. Still watching. Still rotating. Like a massive lens. A mirror. Maybe that's what ground mirror really meant. We're not just sending out memories. We're showing them themselves. And they're learning. Too well. I've returned to the vault. The drive from the Cedarburg array is sealed. I'll attempt to wire it into the vault systems by tomorrow. I've begun building a makeshift frequency amplifier. If I can push the signal through the same loop the old station used, maybe Maya, or whoever else is up there, can hear me again. Maybe someone still orbiting. Or maybe someone beyond. I'll try to speak for all of us. I'll send what we remember. Not what they saw, but what we felt. That's all I can do. That's all we are now. A voice. A signal. A ghost inside the mirror. This is the final transmission. I've done everything I can with what's left. The vault's backup fuel cell is down to 16 hours of stable output. The analog relays are still functioning, but the ambient pressure outside has dropped by 6 millibars in the last 48 hours. I've logged 14 minor tremors beneath the Table Mountain shelf, 3 of them deep enough to trip the seismic alarm that hasn't made a sound since the first week of the blackout. Something is shifting under us, and it's not done. Since returning from the Cedarburg array, I've been assembling what I call the uplink core, a kind of cobbled-together hybrid of the Vault's vintage transceiver and the analog pulse processor I recovered from the dish. I ran it through a resonance amplifier, tuned to 7.400 megahertz, the closest I can get to long-range atmospheric transmission without tripping an automated burnback from the orbital filters. I started sending last night. Short bursts, then longer tones, then spoken voice. I've been transmitting every hour on the hour, using a rotating frequency wheel and switching languages between English, Afrikaans, and French. Not because I think someone will hear it, but because I have to send it, because it's the only thing left we're allowed to do. Speak. The memory of us, what we were, before the silence, isn't digital anymore. It isn't stored in cloud networks or hard drives or servers humming in concrete basements beneath city banks. It's not encoded in social feeds or backup tapes. It's in here. This frequency, these words, this voice, my voice, and the voices of every person who tried to hold on, who didn't run, or who did, and died running. It doesn't matter anymore, because the aliens didn't just come to shut us down. They came to study what we left behind, and now they're starting to speak back. I heard it again last night. Not a human voice. Not exactly. It came through the echo band, over the carrier pulse I sent, just after 2 in the morning. A crackle, a distortion, and then, repeat, form understood, mirror complete, redundancy terminated, thank you. 5 words. Calm, like an automated protocol closing out a task, like something had finished watching us and didn't need to keep the window open anymore. There's more. A few hours after that transmission ended, I received another signal. This one was faint, weak, but unmistakable. It was Maya. I wasn't sure at first. I thought maybe it was another mimic, but the signature was hers. The same modulation profile, the same carrier delay, the same fractured English clipped around the edges from a failing orbital transmitter. I recorded everything. I've written it down in the vault log, and I'll read it now. Every word. This is Maya Nguyen. Station module compromised. Exterior torn open. Low oxygen. Suit integrity stable for now. I'm watching the ships. They don't move fast, but they're weaving something between them. A grid, a net. The Earth is dimmer. Blue band's gone. It looks different from here. I don't know if this will reach you, but if it does, I remember your voice. I remember you said, even if no one listens, speak anyway. I'm speaking. I'm still here. If they're going to take everything, I want them to hear this. We had stories, we had music, we had seasons. I remember the rain. I remember the hum of power lines in summer. I remember laughing. I remember crying and not knowing why. I remember Earth, and that memory is ours, not theirs. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. The message looped 3 times before the signal collapsed. I don't think she's alive anymore, but her voice made it through, and that means we made it through, even if it's only an echo. I've started preparing the last transmission capsule. It's not digital. It's not encrypted. It's not compressed. It's just one reel of magnetic tape spooled onto a manual drive I've rigged to launch upward using a helium cell I found in the emergency air pack locker. It'll rise slowly, not high, but far enough to be carried by the upper wind layers. If it survives, it may end up anywhere. Or nowhere. But I've burned this message onto it. This final frequency, my name, her name, your name, whoever you are, still breathing, still human. I can't tell you how this ends, but I can tell you what I've seen. The Earth is quieter now. The machines aren't patrolling as much. The ships are holding in place. The vertical towers have stopped rising. Their roots are deep, fixed, as if whatever they needed from the ground, they've already taken. And what remains above is just scaffolding. Shell. The outer skin of something else. Maybe a new atmosphere. Maybe a data cage. Or maybe nothing at all. Just a quiet place to observe. I don't think they came to win. I don't think we were a threat. I think we were a question. A problem to solve. A culture to catalog. And I think they've finished. And I think they're leaving. Or at least turning away. Not out of mercy, but because the mirror is complete. And they've seen enough.